So I saw a comment in a post that I was commenting on, that somebody made this statement that hold on, I want to make sure I get the quote exactly right, because it's you cannot limit a right, or it is no longer a right. Now, see, I disagree with this. In my mind, there's a lot of living in America, living in our free nation, where the bare and simple fact is you are free to follow the rules. Period. All those rights that you say you have, where'd you get them? Were they decided, at some point that these were unalienable rights? What were these rights before that? Are they unlimited rights? Did our founding fathers intend for these rights to be complete, absolute, and inviolable? For your right to free speech to be able to overwhelm and shut out my right to free speech? No, they didn't. And that's why we still have issues today with deciding what is free speech and what is hate speech. The problem is when you start limiting either one, you start running afoul of censorship. One of those rights that we're fond of. There are no rights that are absolute. There is no unconditional thing. Nothing you're allowed to do unconditionally. That it's just a simple thing. There are no absolute rights. And consider that. You have a right to own a gun, but at what point does that right end? Is it unlimited, really? So a guy who is clearly intending on using it to harm a large group of people says so when he's buying the gun. That guy should still legally be allowed to, simply because he's just exercising his right to free speech. Hang on. Hey,
Thank you.
have a great night.
Thank you.
I mean, we can restrict rights. Felons have no right to vote in many places. Depending on the felony, they're not allowed to own a firearm. Well, isn't that infringing on the right to keep and bear arms? Sure, he's got a criminal record. What would have happened if we had lost the Revolutionary War? The war for our independence? What would have happened? Well, every single one of those people would have been branded a traitor, committing treason. They'd have been criminals. Our entire nation is founded on criminal intent, really. But the idea that your rights are absolute and unlimited, that's stupid. That's the rationale of a child. And I'll keep referencing that things are the rationale of a child. And let me explain that right here, because I'm going to use it again and again. It's the idea that when you're a child, you are taught some of the basic stuff. You're taught that 2 plus 2 equals 4. You're taught that 4 plus 4 equals 8. And you're given the tools to extrapolate logically from there. When you get a little bit older, they start teaching you things like, 2 plus 2 is 4. But 2 times 2 is also 4. But 4 times 4 is 16, not 8. So you start learning new things to add to the information you have so that you're smarter and you can extrapolate further along the line. There's a great many of you that argue on the internet that appear to have stopped your ability to debate, to learn, to function as a critical thinking, questioning individual, that you have stopped somewhere around the first grade. Like as soon as you assholes got out of kindergarten and you were allowed to start secretly cursing, that's where you stopped. It's like the default on the internet right now is basically, should I offer an intelligent, logical, and rational discourse on the statement he made, or should I just call him a faggot? And in most cases, it ends up in the latter case, with people just being insulting, inflammatory. Rights are usually a good place for that to get started, because they pop up into every conversation. Oh, it's my right to have an opinion. Yes, it's your right to have an opinion. It's also a fact that your opinion could be completely and absolutely full of shit. You have to accept that because your opinion is not fact. Someone says, in my opinion, you should stop right there and begin questioning everything that is about to come out of their mouth, because they are offering up an opinion, not a fact. Everybody has a right to their opinion. They also have to accept that they have the right to be wrong. Even I've admitted I'm wrong before. I have a right to be wrong. However, being wrong, exercising the right to be wrong, means that I have to also exercise the right to correct myself. And humans are notoriously bad at self-correction. We don't self-regulate very well. We think we should have the right to. There is a limit to don't tell me what to do with my body, my rules. Because you have to think things through. You have to think them all the way to their logical conclusion before you just make a decision. My wife and I encounter this on a number of occasions where I'll say something like, I want to paint the house, maybe blue. And she immediately starts to object to a large part of this because, in her mind, she thinks I want to paint the house right now. That I want to go and pick up some blue paint and paint the house some color of blue right now. No, I like to think about an idea, and then I like to come up with ideas for that idea, and then progress that idea to its logical conclusion. Am I even going to like the color blue in a year or so from now when it starts to fade and look like crap? That has to be in there. These same questions need to be asked about rights. Should you have the right to own a firearm? Yeah, absolutely. In order for there to be a secured free nation, right? That's part of the very first fucking rules we have. The Second Amendment talks about guns and just guns because they wanted to make sure that they addressed that one all separate and by itself. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You're not going to take the guns away. And people scream all the time, oh, my right to own a gun is going to be infringed upon. No. You're limited in what kind of fucking firepower you're allowed to have. Do we just allow the average citizen to have a howitzer? Do you know you can own a flamethrower? Almost no laws against them anywhere. But should you own one? No. No, there's no good reason for a civilian to own a fucking flamethrower. So they should be illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to own that type of weapon. Now, the right to keep and bear arms is not the same thing as the right to keep and bear any weapon. That's not what that means. And that's been a subject of discussion for a long time. Just like your right to medical service that you and your physician agree is safe and necessary for your life. That's very little legislation required in that. I like rules that have very little legislation. Like marriage, what should make marriage legal? Adult, consenting, human. Period. Those three things, that eliminates any of the conflict whatsoever, except between people who think personally you shouldn't be allowed to do it. Adult, consenting, human. But we have this thing in this country where we start debating on rights, and what ends up happening is we stop talking about rights, and we simply start talking about restrictions. And a lot of the restrictions that get put in place are moralistic. They're based on religion. A lot of our laws come from religion. You know, the Ten Commandments and the Codex of Hammurabi and there's immeasurable examples in history of where we get our legislation, our law books from. We have the right to a fair and speedy trial. You can give that right up. It's called waiving your right to a thing. Now, if you can give up a right, it's not unlimited. It's not inviolable. If you can give it up, it is not complete and absolute. Because if it was, you couldn't give up your right. You have the right to own a firearm. You are not required to own a firearm. You have the right to go to your doctor and decide that that motherfucker is an abusive piece of shit and will never leave your child or you alone. Both of your lives will be miserable because of that motherfucker. Yeah, in my mind, I don't give a fuck. That's a reason for you to go and have an abortion. And if your doctor and you decide, that's your right to make that choice. And it's not anyone's right to tell you or legislate that away. I don't answer this phone. Rights are not absolute and inviolable. They're not uncorruptible. And here in the United States, frankly, you are free to follow the rules. And there are rules. This is not some weird utopia where everything is a perfect world. This is a democratic republic. Majority rule. And that was usurped this election season. The majority did not vote for Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, the majority of the popular vote went to Hillary Clinton. And aside from that, the larger American vote was no one. Because 42% of the American voter pool abstained from voting. That's a vote in and of itself. To quote Rush, when you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Anyway, I gotta go back in and pretend like I'm at work. I don't have a right on that. I'm actually at work.